I call to order the meeting for the Verona Board of Review for Thursday, May 29th, 2025 at 6:01 p.m. If Clerk Licht would read the roll.
Alderperson Helmke,
Here.
Alderperson Weiss,
Here.
Alderperson Tucker Long,
Here.
Alderperson Braithwaite,
Here.
Alderperson Swanson,
Here.
Alderperson Hoaxed,
Present.
Alderperson Harrison,
Here.
Mayor Diaz,
Here.
and I'm here as well.
All right, that's enough people to proceed. We'll move on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes from the August 8th, 2024 Board of Review meeting. Questions, comments, corrections, or motions to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Alder Harrison. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Humke. Last chance for corrections. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the August 8th, 2024 Board of Review meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. We'll move on to item 4, which is the confirmation of open book and board review notices.
The open book and board of review notices were posted and published in accordance with statute, and they are in the packet as well.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to item 5, which is selecting a chairperson for the board of review. If someone else wants to take their time to do it, I'd be happy to nominate someone else. Otherwise, I can keep doing it if people want.
I will nominate you.
Nomination by Alder Humke. Any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations?
Do you need a second on that?
Don't think so. I think what we traditionally do is we would entertain a motion then, I guess, to pick me. So if someone, I guess, wants to make the motion.
I will make a motion to have Mayor Diaz chair the Board of Review.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Hoaxed. All those in favor of selecting me as the chairperson for the Board of Review, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, and that is resolved. Item 6, verify who is current on their Board of Review training. Clerk Licht.
So Wisconsin statutes require that at least one board of review member takes the training every year, and this year, myself and Alderperson Weiss have completed the training.
Excellent. All right, we'll move on to item 7, which is verification that the city has an ordinance for the confidentiality of income and expense information provided to the assessor under state law, Wisconsin statute 70.47, paren 7, paren AF. Clerk Licht.
We do have an ordinance, and it is in the packet as well.
Excellent. With that, we move on to item 8, which is the receipt of the assessment roll and the assessor's affidavit by the clerk from the assessor. Clerk Licht.
I have received the roll and the affidavit from the assessor, and I believe the assessor has an update he would like to give everyone as well.
Excellent.
Thank you. Well, good evening, Board of Review. For the record, I just want to state that the 2025 assessment roll for the city of Verona has been completed, and the assessor's affidavit has been signed, and the roll is now in the clerk's possession. So those formalities are done. This year, this 2025 assessment year, is the scope of work is a maintenance assessment year, meaning that we are maintaining the assessments at the level they were set last year during the reassessment. So this year, there were not changes made for market conditions per se. Most of the changes to the assessments were made for physical changes to properties, things like new construction, remodeling, tear downs, any new parcels added to the assessment roll because of replatting or splits or anything like that had to be assessed. And then we reviewed all the sales that took place in the city during calendar year 2024, made changes where necessary, but the scope of work is a smaller scope of work this year as compared to a reassessment year like we had last year. That being said, there's still an awful lot of new construction. I think we'll be adding to the assessment roll this year approximately $210 million of new construction. And we are not even assessing at 100% market value like we were last year. So when the state equalizes that amount, it's probably going to be more like 220 million or 224 million of new construction. So another big year. You guys are keeping me busy here. But other than that, we do have a hearing tonight. It's been a couple of years, I think, since we've had a hearing. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but it might be useful to go over the procedure before the hearing actually starts. I don't know if that's something that's going to be on the agenda or something you'd like me to go through, but I'd be happy to do that.
I would defer to your discretion. It is part of the script to go over what's supposed to happen. So I can read it, or you can go over it now and then people could ask questions. Because, it has been a while since we've done one of these.
Sure, well, I can give my take on it, and if you want to go through the script, that's great too. Essentially, the way this all begins is that because the assessment roll's been completed, the affidavit's been signed. By state law, the assessor is presumed correct. I signed an affidavit stating that all the assessments are correct, and the assessor's trained and certified in how to do assessments. So the burden of proof is on the objector to show that the assessment is incorrect. Therefore, the objector typically goes first right after the hearing gets started. The objector would present their arguments, their evidence to show that the assessment's incorrect. The assessor has an opportunity to ask questions of the objector. The Board of Review members have an opportunity to ask questions of the objector. And at some point, when that part of it's done, you come to me, and then it's my turn to present. And what I'll present, I'll have copies of the assessment records so that you can have all the information about the property that's being objected to. And then I'll have some other information about how the value was arrived at and documents in support of the valuation. At that point, the objector can ask questions of the assessor, the Board of Review can ask questions of the assessor, and generally you'd allow each side to also have some kind of a follow-up after that. At some point, you will have to close the hearing, officially say that this hearing is closed, you're moving into deliberations. I would encourage you all to ask all the questions that you might have in your mind up until that point, because once you go into deliberations, you can't ask questions anymore of either of us, the assessor or the objector. That would be considered entering additional evidence into the hearing after the close of the hearing, which isn't appropriate. So just ask lots of questions if you have anything on your mind. But when you close the hearing, you go into deliberations, then essentially you discuss. And somebody can make a motion to either change the assessment based on specific evidence or to sustain the assessment based on evidence. And any decision that you make regarding the assessment has to be by roll call vote, not just all in favor say aye. I think that's basically my summary of it.
Excellent. And then I'll go over the script when we get to the specific objectors.
Okay.
Anything else to add for item 8? Okay. Moving on to item 9, which is verification of the open book changes.
Yes, there were a few open book changes, and they have been recorded in the assessment roll.
Excellent. All right. I will move on to item 10, which is to review the assessment roll. Clerk Licht.
I have the assessment roll here, and I can pass it around if anybody would like to see it, or else we can get into our hearing first and then review the roll as well.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 11, which is allowing taxpayers to examine the assessment roll. I believe there's just one objector here. And obviously it's open if anyone else wants to review it. But with that, we'll move on to item 12, which is objection hearings. First up, we have 12A, which is the consideration of objection to the 2025 real estate tax assessment from NS Retail Holdings, LLC, for property located at 660 Hometown Circle, tax parcel ID number 060814294102. Yeah, if you want to take a seat, and then I'll read through this whole script. So the way this works is that first I would ask the clerk to introduce the case for hearing. The clerk will then swear in all the witnesses. Each individual should state their name and address on the record. The person filing the objection will testify and present evidence first. The assessor may then ask the property owner objector questions. Board of Review members may also ask any additional questions they have for the property owner objector. And as noted by Mr. Peters, that if you have questions, you should ask them because you won't get a chance after the hearing's closed. Any other witnesses present in the support of the property owner / objector will testify. The assessor and the Board of Review members may ask questions of the witnesses. The assessor will then present their case in support of the assessment. The property owner objector may then ask the assessor questions. The Board of Review members may also ask any additional questions they have for the assessor. Any other witnesses present in support of the assessor will then testify. The property owner objector and the Board of Review members may also ask questions of the witnesses. The property owner objector may respond to the assessor's testimony by presenting any other evidence. Again, of course, Board of Review members may ask additional questions. The assessor may then present any other evidence in support of the assessment. The property owner / objector and the Board of Review members may ask questions. After all evidence has been submitted under oath, the property owner or objector may make a brief summary of his or her case to the Board of Review. The assessor may follow with a brief summary of his case. After each summary has been presented, the taking of testimony will be closed. The Board of Review will deliberate on the testimony in open session, either immediately following the testimony or at a later date to be announced. We'll do it, obviously, right now. And then that's pretty much how it all goes. So I will ask Clerk Lick to introduce the case for hearing.
All right, this is the case of NS Retail Holdings LLC. The objector's address is 3800 Emerald Drive East, Onalaska, Wisconsin, 54650. The objector's agent, J.C. Yeadon, is present to represent NS Retail Holdings LLC. The address for the property in question is 660 Hometown Circle, Verona, Wisconsin, 53593. The tax key number for this property is 0608-142-94102. The property has been classified for assessment purposes as commercial. The value of the assessment, the value in the assessment roll for the current year is land, $2,204,400. Improvements, $11,186,800, and the total assessment is $13,391,200.
Thank you. We will move then on to the next part of it, which is to ask the clerk to swear in all witnesses. For the record, we will ask the objector to state their full name and address, and then also state what amount, in their opinion, is the fair market value of the property. Clerk Licht.
Would all persons intending to provide testimony for this hearing, including the assessor, please raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you solemnly attest that the testimony which you shall give in the matter now on hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Would each person who has just been sworn in please state your name and address for the record? You can start with the objector.
Do you want me to state the owner's address? You know, since I don't know if I'm the agent, if it was the owner's address or.
You could state your name and address.
Okay, all right, sorry, I just wanted to be clear. My name is J.C. Yaden. My address is, wow, I'm blanking on what my business address is for some reason. Sorry, give me 1 second. Got put under pressure here. Oh, I'm really sorry. Uh, 9229 Delegates Row, Suite 375, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46982, or 46240, sorry.
Thank you. And the assessor?
Yes, Dean Peters, Wisconsin Certified Assessor, address W6237 Newbert Road, Appleton, Wisconsin, 54914.
And the assessor, could you please state the estimated level of assessment for the current year?
Yes, the estimated level for this year is 93.5%.
Thank you.
Okay, so as dictated by the outline, the person filing the objection will testify and present evidence first. Before that happens, I will read this following statement. The Board of Review wants you to understand, the objector, that under state law, the Board of Review is required to uphold the assessor's valuation of your property as being correct, unless you by your testimony can show the assessor's valuation to be incorrect. In other words, the burden of proof is upon the objector. Do you understand?
Yeah, yep.
Excellent. All right, I guess then it's on you to present evidence and also include the amount. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking to me. And then also, of course, state the amount that you believe that is the fair market value of the property.
Okay, thank you. There's probably more than what you need there, but. There should be another packet if you want one,
Okay.
and it's the same as that.
Okay. Thank you.
You ready for me to start?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so, yep, we are discussing the property located at 660 Hometown Circle in Verona. This is a Festival of Foods supermarket, has a square footage of around 67,309, built in 2019, currently assessed at $13,391,200, or $199 per square foot. That summary page you will see first. If you flip over to the next page, I do have 5 comparable sales, all located within Wisconsin, but not in Verona. I had to expand my perimeters to find similar property types of recent sales of the property or of similar properties. But I did apply a location adjustment to account for that. The unadjusted sale price per square foot range from $39.27 to $135.72 after adjustments for which we applied market conditions adjustment, a size adjustment, a year built, a location adjustment, as I mentioned, and a land to building ratio adjustment. The sale comparables range at a sale price per square foot from $49.70 to $118.54. The average of these adjusted sales is $87.45 with a median sale price of per square foot of $102.57. I did reconcile towards the higher end of the range, so higher than the average and median to be conservative. And then the rest of the packet just has each comparable sale, just to give more detail of the actual sale details. And as you can see from just the sale comparison approach page and the details page, that these are all supermarkets that are close in size, a little bit more variation in age, but again, a year bill adjustment was accounted for that. And again, they are not in Verona, but a location adjustment is made to account for that. If you have any questions. feel free.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
Was there a reason you didn't do any, I guess, grocery store comparisons in either Middleton, Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, or any of the Madison neighboring
Yeah,
communities?
so I looked out all like comparable sales in the state. If there was no sale in those areas, it was likely because there was no recent sale. I didn't want to use one that was like 10 years ago. And I want to make sure that it's comparable to the subject property, so.
Got it. Any other questions from the Board of Reviews for the objector? Alder Helmke and then Alder Tucker-Long.
Just so I can get clarity, did you pay taxes in 2024 on this value? Like, it looks like, I'm looking at that first sheet that you prepared that says the valuation was 13, I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at the right. It says it was 13 million, 426. Is that what?
I believe that was with the assessment ratio, is that correct? But yes, the owner did pay taxes in 2024. You may be asking because of why we didn't come last year. Well, I am the agent for Festival of Foods, and we just weren't unable to object at that time. It wasn't because we didn't think that the value wasn't excessive. It's just we were unable to do it.
Okay.
Alder Tucker-Long.
Looking at these properties that you're comparing it to, did you say they are all grocery stores?
Yes, they are all supermarkets, yes.
So they've all become supermarkets?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
They've all become supermarkets? Because these aren't all supermarkets when they were sold.
Yeah, so yes, so were supermarkets or could become supermarkets. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, okay. Were any of these new builds?
New builds? No.
Okay.
The newest one was Sale Comp 1, built in 2012, but nothing that was built in 2019. That's Scepter property.
Alder Weiss.
I'm looking at the year-built adjustment, and where do those numbers come from? What's the,
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a little description there of adjustments in the left-hand corner underneath the sale comps, but a 0.5% depreciation would apply per year. Difference, per year difference.
so 0.5% per year? So then the value would go to 0 at 200 years old?
The 0.5% per year difference, so if 2019, it was built in 2019, and the Sale Comp 1 was built in 2012, that's like a 6-year difference, so there would be a 3.5% because it's half of that, so it's not per 1 year percent. Does that make sense? I guess I don't understand what you're asking.
So just like thinking about, well, I'm thinking about like what would the year built be that would, where the value would be like, this is a worthless property, right? Because then I would figure that the percentage applied would get to the like very, very low value.
Like the
at that
useful
term.
life of a property is,
Right.
I guess, what you're asking. I mean, usually I don't have the useful life of a supermarket on top of my hand. I mean, I typically would look at that if I was doing a cost approach, but I don't have that information written down, so I can't give you an estimated number of what the useful life of a supermarket is.
So how was the 0.5% depreciation
Applied.
applied? How was that arrived at? Like why 0.5 and not 0.7 or 0.73?
Yeah, I understand. 0.5 depreciation is just, like, we've seen that in many actual appraisals, so this isn't an appraisal, this is just an analysis that we've created, but an actual appraisal report, we have worked with many appraisers that have used the same methodologies, and appraisers are, practice license for valuation. So that's just something that we've seen in their practices.
Okay. And so the other, is it okay if I ask 2 questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry. So then the other thing that I was, just thinking aloud here, but so in these other cities where there's a sale going on because of, the local nature of real estate. So are these real estate markets? I mean, I know there's a market condition, but it seems like if you're selling a large retail store, then that kind of presumes that there's like a lack of economic activity going on, right? Because like, why does somebody close a grocery store?
Right, right.
And so, but then like the Mauston has a 0% market condition adjustment from
Yeah.
Verona, which seems, just intuitively, that doesn't seem right to me. But
So-
I guess, where did the market conditions come from?
So the market conditions is based off of when the property is sold, not necessarily the location of what it is. Looking at Mauston compared to Verona, that's where I would look at the different locations. But the market conditions is based off of when the property was sold. So, in 2023, I have Sale Comp 3 and Sale Comp 5. It sold in 2023, and in 2023, as you know, the market could be different than it is now.
Oh, okay.
So that's where the market conditions. If I'm looking at a location, that's where I compare one city to another.
Okay. And then what is that comparison of the city to another? Where
What does
is
that
that,
look
where is
like?
that coming from?
Yeah, so that information was taken from CoStar, which is a independent third-party source that we could use where it gives me market information and also demographic information. So I looked at what the consumer spending was, since this is a supermarket and, consumers spend money. I look at consumer spending from a 5-mile radius and say for the SailComp one in Milwaukee, and then I compared that to what CoStar says the consumer spending in Verona was, and made a % adjustment based on that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for the objector? Alder Hoax.
Do you know what was the assessed value in 2023? You know?
Assessed value?
Yeah.
I think I have the market value here. I'm not quite sure what the actual assessment ratio was, to be honest. I don't know if the assessor can answer that during this time or not.
It looks like it was acquired for 17 million in 2023, right?
It was acquired, and yes, it was acquired for 17.
So was there any objection at that point to the assessment? I guess that's what, because if they're paying significantly more than it's assessed, and there was no objection, then I guess I don't understand
Yeah, so.
why it's excessive now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt you. In 2023, again, and last year, it's not necessarily we didn't think that the property was not excessive. I'm the agent. There could have been, I wasn't a part of this property in 2023, so I can't contest as to why it was or wasn't. There was no objection there, but, based off the information, if I were to look at this property in 2023, I probably would have objected it. And as for the acquisition, yes, there was a acquisition in 2023, but that was, I believe, subject to a sale leaseback, which a sale leaseback is a financial transaction, not necessarily market, so it was given little consideration from me. So a sale leaseback is when a company sells a property and then immediately leases it back from the buyer. And this could use to retain, raise capital while still retaining the asset. So I don't believe it's a market transaction.
Alder Helmke, and then Alder Takarlon.
Yeah, I'm curious, given that to the mayor's question earlier about properties in Dane County, I'm curious if you consider any sort of other property like space, because I just really am struggling with these locations you have selected compared to the situation we're in Dane County. Curious, whether there's anything else that you've even thought of, other bigger buildings, or I know it's a little tricky because supermarkets are kind of their own thing, but.
Yeah, so I wouldn't select, even if a property was built in 2019 and was 67,000 square feet, I wouldn't select just any building. It would need to be a building where another supermarket or just another retail property could use. Again, CoStar is something that I looked at for sales. I can't contest to say that I have these sales that I denied and didn't take in Dan. Like I said, I did look at the entire state, and if it wasn't a retail property or a big enough retail property, that's the reason why I didn't use it.
Alder Takarlon.
To echo what Phil was saying, so I look back at your assessments, and the assessments haven't changed much since 2019 when the building was built. So it's not just that you didn't have time last year, but you haven't had time for 5 years to contest this, and suddenly it's a big deal.
Right. I think I might have mentioned it, but maybe I didn't specifically, but I, haven't been a part of this property for 5 years. I am the agent of the property. We weren't, engaged with them. And, we are, my firm is a property tax firm, so, Festival Foods, they're a supermarket, so they're not, as knowledgeable in the property tax information, so they may have not known that it was overassessed then.
Okay. And looking at the location valuations, it shows that there's a 0% difference between the location here and the location in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Did that just come from CoStar or?
Yes, that information came from CoStar, looking at the consumer spending in that area compared to the consumer spending within a 5-mile radius in this area. So it was completely third-party information of where I got it.
Okay, and when you say consumer spending, are you talking about the people who frequent shop at grocery stores, or are you talking about the land sales for commercial properties?
I believe this is like third-party information, but I believe the information, it's not just supermarkets, it's just retail spending in general.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or?
I mean, it kind of does, but I don't understand what retail spending by consumers has to do with commercial land prices.
Well, we're just looking at what type of market it is in one area compared to another. So, consumer spending, obviously consumers are going to spend in a better market, because there's more options, more retail areas or spaces, buildings, stores to shop at in one area or another.
Sure, but, Kenosha has a lot more land available in that same spending market, and so there's more scarcity in our environment for this type of land, which should affect
Is
the
that a
price.
question?
Yeah, I was going to ask why, is there any sort of accommodation in your numbers for that kind of a comparison, or actual estimated price per square foot or per acre for land sales between the two locations?
No, I mean, I didn't necessarily look at land sales just because, or I didn't look at that specific information for Kenosha or other properties. Land sales are sometimes difficult to come by because they can't just be any land sales. They have to be land sales that are for commercial properties. It can't be for residential. That wouldn't be comparable to what we're talking to. They're not always easy to come by. And when I say easy to come by, I mean there's not a lot there to compare to.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the objector? Alder Swanson.
Just a bit of clarity I'm looking for here. You list on your scaling for the land to building ratio, 3% per increment. What is the specific increment?
Per increment of excess land, which is compared, like you see in the line item, land to building ratio. So the difference in those increments.
Right. I was asking, what is the specific number that each increment turns over at, if you have one?
I do not have one.
Other questions for the Alder Braithwaite?
Yeah, in your analysis, you compared supermarkets that have sold recently across the state. In your analysis, did you compare other festival foods that have not sold, just basically what they're
assessed at?
what they're assessed at?
I do, I didn't have that comparison, broken out, but I did look at it. But again, you still have to apply like a location adjustment to quantify for the different cities that it's in. I mean, I don't have any information to prove of this, but I will say $198 per square foot is definitely on the higher end of the range of other festival foods that I have seen.
Other questions for the objector? Okay, seeing no other questions, I will ask the objector, are there any other witnesses that you would like to present?
No.
Okay, I have to ask. So, okay, now we will move to the next part where the assessor will present their case in support of the assessment. Mr. Peters.
Thank you. Before I do that, I do have a couple of quick questions for the
Yes.
objector.
Oh, absolutely.
I wanted to ask the square footage that you've got for the subject property.
Yes.
67,309. I have measurements that indicate a floor area of 69,235, which is a little larger. Where did you get your number from? Did that come from Festival or?
I believe it did.
Okay.
Again, I don't have like proof of what it did, but I believe it did come from Festival. That's just information that we obtained from them kind of a while ago, so.
Okay. And then on the comparable sales,
Yes.
can you tell me which of them were vacant or unoccupied at the time they transacted?
I believe all of those were vacant at the time of sale.
All right, so none of them were under lease at the time of sale either.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. No further questions.
Okay.
And then what I'd like to do first for my testimony, I'll provide 2 packets to the board members, and I'd have enough for the objector as well here. And then I'll explain the packets.
Thank you.
Just interrupt me if you can.
I can hear you, I just don't know if it's being picked up through our system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the first packet that I was presenting are the property records for the subject property that's being contested. On that form, you'll see in the upper right corner, the current assessed value, $2,204,400 for the land, $11,186,800 for the improvements, which is the building and any other site improvements. And the total assessed value, $13,391,200. There's a picture of the building, some basic construction information, including square footage and so on the first page. The next page shows attachments, the enclosed areas at the front of the building and the open porch areas and things. The third page gives you the measurements. These were, I think, taken from the plans originally when the building was built and then corroborated by field measurements. And the last page, or second last page, gives you information on paving and parking lot lights, things like that, and then building permits and sale history. And the last page is an income approach that I worked up that I'll explain as well. So according to my measurements, the building has 69,235 square feet plus a second floor office mezzanine, which adds an additional 7,525 square feet. So I would count the total building square footage at 76,760, including the second floor. The land is 7.77 acres. It's a large site necessary for the supermarket and the parking and so on. The building is high-quality construction for a grocery store. 20-foot wall height, fully sprinklered. There's an elevator inside to go up to the second floor mezzanine. Additional site improvements include the paved parking lot, which is about 147,000 square feet, which is about 3.3 acres of paving. So there's an awful lot of paving there. And parking lot lighting, I think we counted 16 light posts. So there's a fair amount of improvements in addition to the building itself. If you isolate the value of the building without the site improvements that we worked up for the cost approach, The building itself was $10,855,800, which is $141 a square foot. That's just the building, not the land, not anything else. And if you take the total assessed value divided by the square footage of the building, using my square footage, it comes to $174.47 a square foot. So those are the numbers I'm referencing. They're a little different than what you saw from the objector when you look at it on a per square foot basis, because we're using two different square footages for the building. So keep that in mind as we go through this. A little bit more about this property. The current owner is NS Retail Holdings LLC, which is a company, I think, out of Texas. It is not owned by Festival Foods. Festival Foods originally purchased the land and built the building, and they owned it until October of 2023 when they sold it to the current owner on a sale leaseback. And the sale price at that time was about $17.1 million. So a sale leaseback. This typically occurs when a business that owns and occupies their real estate enters into a lease agreement to sell their property and remain as occupants under the lease term. The motivation that they usually have for that, first of all, they negotiate the sale price and the lease agreement at the same time. So there's a relationship between what they're going to pay in rent and what the buyer thinks is a fair price for that kind of rental income. And they do typically shop these around. If they're going to enter into a sale leaseback, they look for an investor who might be interested in doing that. The motivation for the seller is usually to get some quick cash. They can cash out. In this case, Festival got $17 million for the property, and they can still occupy that location long-term. They're now paying rent rather than property taxes and mortgage and so on, but they still have the advantage of continuing to occupy that space for their business. The motivation of the buyer, who is usually a real estate investor or real estate investment group, the motivation is to acquire income-producing properties, basically to invest and make money. So what they're looking for is to own leased properties that produce regular monthly income, rent payments from the tenant, and they're looking for relatively safe investments. So the safer the investment would be a stable tenant, a long-term lease, and typically a triple net lease. And what that means is that the buyer doesn't have to worry about paying for expenses or for maintenance of the building or anything. The tenant is responsible for the costs of nearly all the repairs and maintenance under a triple net lease. They're also responsible for insurance and property taxes and all that stuff. So it's fairly hands-off to the buyer. And you know, a lot of commercial property transacts based on rental income. Apartments do, other types of retail property, leased office spaces do. So it's very common when we're doing appraisal work for commercial properties to think about what kind of rent is that property either bringing in or capable of bringing in, because a lot of the commercial buyers out there are people who are purchasing property for that type of an investment. And if you want to get an accurate appraisal, you have to basically understand the motivations of the buyers and the sellers in the commercial real estate market. But once the lease is in place, the market value of that property is going to be tied to that lease. I've seen a couple of Festival Foods that have sold, and typically they go into a 15-year lease with at least 2 options to renew every 5 years. I do not have a copy of the actual lease for this property. I have not seen it. But this is what I know from a few other Festival Foods. So that is a fairly stable investment. And basically, this property, once it's leased to Festival Foods, is not going to be marketed to any other grocery store who might want to locate there because it's under lease to Festival for long-term, right? So when we're talking about how would this property sell, what price would it sell for, we have to think about who it could be marketed to. It's not going to be marketed to another grocery store. So things like how much the consumer in that area spends might not be as relevant if it's going to be marketed for investment purposes versus if it's going to be marketed to another grocery store wanting to locate there. So the building's already occupied by Festival. A prospective buyer would be a real estate investor who'd purchase it for its income potential. So how do investors decide what's a fair purchase price for income-producing investment property? Basically, the appraisal approach called the income approach is intended to represent the way that buyers and sellers behave when property is leased or rented. How do they decide what to pay for it? Basically, the process for running an income approach capitalization is to take the gross rent, which is the total amount of rental income that that property would bring in under the lease, allow for a subtraction for vacancy and collection loss as an industry standard, and then subtract off the owner's operating expenses, which are fairly minimal under a triple net lease, which gives you the net operating income for the property. Then, once you have the net operating income, you apply a capitalization rate, and the capitalization rate is kind of like the conversion factor that converts the amount of the income that that property can generate into an indication of the value of that property. Cap rates tend to range from about 5% to 12% typically, and the lower the cap rate, the higher the property value. A lot of that has to do with risk. A riskier investment that makes $1 million a year is going to sell for something less than a very stable property that generates $1 million a year. So the fact that it's a long-term triple net lease makes it more on the stable side. I said cap rates range from about 5 to 12%. I've landed at about a 7% for this one, which I think is reasonable. Another thing that can affect cap rates or capitalization rates is the availability of financing, things like interest rates and what's typical for financing, because most buyers use financing. All right, well then, let's look at the last page of my packet that I just went over, the first one. That's where I put together an income approach. So I've listed the market rent at $14.75 a square foot annual rent. If you look at retail space, prime retail space, especially smaller spaces, can rent upwards of $30 a square foot. I think some of the higher rents that we have here in Verona are around $30 a square foot. Larger offices modern office space tends to rent for $14 to $16 a square foot, something like that. And you might get down to, $8 to $12 a square foot for dated or older kinds of properties that, are not in prime locations. So $14.75 is what I deem to be reasonable for market rent. I applied that to the building square footage that I've got for the building to get $1,132,210 for potential gross rent. I subtracted 3% for vacancy and collection loss allowance, like I mentioned, as an industry standard, which gives us the effective gross income. I took off another 8% for the owner's operating expenses, which is $87,860. Gets me down to the net operating income of a little over $1 million. I apply the capitalization rate of 7%, and I get a value indication of $14,434,000, which is actually somewhat higher than the current assessed value. But I wanted to provide that just because the way I would look at this property is this is the way that this property would sell, is based on its income producing potential because it's currently under lease. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. That being said, I also put together some sales. When I saw the sales that were presented initially, which did come to me during the open book process, my initial reaction was, well, these are really not the same kind of property. They might be grocery stores or things that became grocery stores, but if they were vacant at the time they were sold, that's not the same as what we have here. We have a fully leased operating store, a modern build. And so I heard some, questions earlier about the location. I think it is appropriate to go to other parts of the state to look for comparable sales of grocery stores, just because there aren't all that many. But it's not necessary to use vacant stores that were unoccupied, because there are still sales of stores that are leased, just like this one, which I think would make better sales comparisons. So one of them is right here in Madison. It's actually in Shorewood Hills, and that's the first one in the second packet that I presented. This is the Pick and Save at 3650 University Avenue. And the square footage here is 51,370, so it's smaller than our subject property. If you look kind of halfway down the page, it says previous sale as a heading. The sale date was January 12th of 2023. The sale price was $12.65 million, which is $246 a square foot. That's an awful lot higher per square foot than what I'm assessing this property at. and it's a fairly recent sale, and it's local. So that's one data point we can look at. Other sales in maybe somewhat similar areas. The second sale that I have in here is a leased pick and save also that sold, this was in Mukwonago, Wisconsin. So we're heading a little further east here towards Milwaukee. The sale is more recent. If you go down to previous sale, it was June of 2024. The sale price was $12 million, which is $187.50 a square foot. Again, that's higher than what I'm assessing the current property at. And it's a very similar size. It's 64,000 square foot building. It's older too, built in 1990. The third one, I had to go further north, up where I'm from. I'm from Appleton. This sale is an actual Festival Foods, which is in Menasha, Wisconsin. Similar size, 78,000 some square foot. It's a modern build, built in 2016, sold for $18.4 million in late 2021. And the last page is a Festival Foods in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, 70,000 square feet, sold also in late 2021 for $12.1 million. The last two I wanted to include, even though they're not as geographically close, they're actually Festival Foods, which I think is appropriate since we're appraising a Festival Foods. So you can see there's a big difference between these sale prices that I'm showing you that are $12 to $18 million and the ones that were presented by the objector, which are, $3 to $6 million roughly. And I attribute that partly to the fact that those buildings were vacant at the time of the sale. So it's really not apples to apples, in my opinion, to use those sale comps when we have others available that really more represent the property that we're talking about here. All right, I think that's essentially the information that I wanted to present. I guess I can open it up to questions if you'd like to have the objector ask first.
Yeah, so if the objector would like to ask the assessor, your time.
Do you know if the two sales in, that you provided in Sheboygan and Menasha, are those, obviously they were leased by Festival Foods, but are those still leasebacks?
I wasn't able to confirm if the Menasha sale was a sale leaseback. Although it could have been, the second one was not in Sheboygan.
I have no other questions.
Okay, with that, I would open up to questions from Board of Review members. I guess I'll go first. I was looking through the assessment. I noticed the EV charger wasn't included as a value amount. Can you explain that, I guess?
Yeah, I didn't itemize every little thing, I guess, that I could have. Some people itemize, for example, the coolers that are in the grocery store and say, how many square feet of cooler space do you have? How many EV chargers do you have? I didn't go into that level of detail.
Okay. That seems understandable. On the packet with the comparable sales, what do the stars mean in the upper right corner?
That is, I believe, CoStar's market rating.
Okay. I presume more stars is a better market?
Yes.
Okay.
Or it could be the actual, what they rate the building as in terms of desirability.
Okay.
Something to that effect.
And then I guess my final one is, we've heard two different figures for square footage. How do we reconcile that? Because they can't both be right.
Yeah, well, if you look at the drawing that I have in the first packet, this was the measurements that the city has on file for the building. That's what I used. We traced around the outside of the building to get the square footage of 69,235. And then it's just at the very front of the building that they have a second floor mezzanine. I believe CoStar includes those mezzanines in their square footages when they do analysis per square foot. So since that's the type of comparables I'm providing, I chose to do that as well, rather than just using the ground floor square footage. And I think it's also supported by the fact that there's an elevator in the building to get up to that level, that really is usable space on the second floor. So I included the outside gross building area of 69,235 square feet plus the second floor office mezzanine. So it's supported by the measurements. I don't know where the other figure came from, but I can't accept it if it's not based on some kind of measurements.
Okay, thank you. Questions from other Board of Review members? Oh, Alder Braithwaite.
I was trying to run the different calculations of the valuation at the different square footages listed. But can you walk me through yours? The total value was 13,391,200. And your square footage, your total square footage was what?
Including the upper level, it was 76,760.
And not including the upper level was the 69,235 number?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the Board of Review? All right, seeing no further questions, Mr. Peters, do you have any other witnesses to present in support?
I do not.
All right. Okay, so now the property owner / objector may respond to the assessor's testimony by presenting any other evidence.
I have technically no other evidence to give, but one thing that I do want to just comment on is the assessor obviously mentioned that the property is currently leased, for which is accurate. And he said that, you know, you have to look at sales that are leased and see what the investor would buy for this property. And I did look at fee simple sales, which are properties that are vacant at the time of sale, and he looked at sales that are leased at the time of sale. And it is significant, as he said, between the two sales of prices per square foot. But when you start looking at properties that are currently leased, while I know the subject property is leased, you also look at the business valuation, which is not real estate. Which is why we looked at vacant sales, because we're just valuing what the real estate is, not what the business and the real estate is. No further comments.
Okay. Let's see now. Board of Review members may ask any additional questions they have for the property owner / objector. Any additional questions from the Board of Review members? Alder Jack-Harlan.
Did you have any evidence, or can you let us know where you got your measurements from?
Yeah, so I don't have any like diagram as what he had. I believe we got our measurements from Festival Foods of what they just have on record, but I have no like email or any documentation saying that. Yep.
Any other questions from the Board of Review? Alder Braithwaite.
I didn't quite catch what you said previous to that question about your analysis with the vacant properties.
Want me to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, could you just expand that? Like, I might need to hear it a second
Yeah.
time.
So I found fee simple sales, which are sales that are vacant at the time of sale, and compared to lease fee sales, which are sales that are leased at the time of sale, there's a big difference between the sale prices per square foot. Lease fee sales are a lot higher per square foot because the investor is seeing that they have an income apart when they buy it, which, you know, Festival Foods is occupying that real estate or that property, but we are valuing what the real estate is, not what the business is with the real estate, which is why I looked at lease or fee simple sales.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from the Board of Review? Seeing no further questions, the assessor may then present any other evidence in support of the assessment. Mr. Peters.
Well, I don't really have any other evidence. A couple of points that I just wanted to clarify. There was a sale of this particular property as a sale leaseback for $17 million. The reason why I don't have it assessed at $17 million is because sale leasebacks are not truly arm's length sales for purposes of I guess, appraisal and for purposes of assessment. The reason being that there's a relationship, a tenant landlord relationship essentially that goes along with that sale. So they're related parties at that point. So I couldn't base the assessment on the purchase price, although I will tell you that the purchase price probably does reflect the lease agreement that's in place. And it's likely that if this property were to sell to a different third party, that investors think alike, that the sale price might be something like that again, although that's speculation. So what I did instead with this income approach that I presented is I took what I think is market rent and applied market capitalization rates and so on to arrive at a valuation that's slightly higher than what it's currently assessed at. But I think that's the best approach that best represents how this property would most likely be marketed and sold. Therefore, it's the most credible appraisal methodology to be used. The argument that the income approach would include business value, I don't think that's really the case, because what we're looking at here is we're looking at just the income that's generated by the real estate itself. We're not looking at any income generated by sales of food or anything in the grocery store, which is what the business is. We're just simply looking at the income that's generated from renting the space, the real estate itself. And so, and that approach is supported by the Wisconsin Property Assessment Manual as usable for appraisal purposes, if the income is generated from the real estate rental rather than a business activity, if that makes sense to everybody. Another point that I should bring up on the Property Assessment Manual, which is published by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, which essentially tells assessors how to do our work, is they do say that if you're appraising a property that is occupied, that you should not use sales of vacant or dark stores essentially as comparables. It's another reason why I was rejecting the comparable sales that were presented by the objector.
Thank you. Any question from the objector to the assessor?
Does the manual say vacant or does it say dark sales? Because I think there is a difference between those two. Dark
Yes.
sales, yes, there is, well, sorry, that's not a question.
Yeah, you're right. The manual talks about dark properties, which is defined as a property that is empty on the market longer than a typical time frame to market a property. So I have not gone through and verified whether these particular sales are dark. I just know that they're less comparable since they were empty as opposed to the comparisons that I presented, which were leased and occupied.
Any other questions?
No other questions?
Okay, any questions for the assessor from Board of Review members? Yes. Alder Tucker.
So what you were just saying about dark properties, is there anything that's taken into effect if a property like went out of business and then is vacant and sold versus like, does that factor into the dark property at all, or what you were just saying?
Really what dark means is that the property sits on the market for a longer than typical amount of time, and then it kind of becomes distressed at that point, where it starts to be a property that someone says, hey, this hasn't sold for an abnormal amount of time, and at that point, it's not comparable to a functioning occupied property in good condition.
Okay, so it's more about the condition of the building having been like vacant for so long.
It's more that than the fact that a previous occupant went out of business.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Alder Braithwaite.
Is there a standard length of time for that time to go from vacant to dark, or is that based on a market analysis per region?
It's not standard. It can change with the times. So if if that type of property is typically takes, let's say, 9 to 12 months to sell or something like that, and the property is gone 24 months without selling, there's a certain point where you can say that it has, gone past the typical marketing time and is now falling into that dark category. But this, depends on the real estate market. Sometimes if the market is hot, things sell quicker, and it doesn't take as long to become dark. Or if the market is, slower, then it might be typical to stay on the market longer before it sells, which extends the time before it becomes dark.
Is there a generally accepted range? Like 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10? Or is it?
There's really,
just
there's really
depends
not.
on
I
market?
mean,
Yeah,
it's,
okay.
it's fluid.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for the assessor from the Board of Review? Okay, seeing no further questions, after all evidence has been submitted under oath, the property owner/objector may make a brief summary of their case to the Board of Review.
Brief summary of our case. All right, so, so as I have presented in front of you, I have 5 sale comparables, all of which, as we have discussed, that are vacant at the time of sale. I don't believe that this is just a summary, so I'm not trying to testify. I don't really know the rules all that are. I believe they are all within a relatively on sale with a standard time frame. But all of them are Wisconsin and are similar to the subject property. Therefore, I am requesting a value of $8,777,080, which is $120 per square foot.
Thank you. Now the assessor may follow with a brief summary of their case. Mr. Peters.
Thank you. So I began by discussing the ownership and occupancy of the building, talked about what is a sale leaseback, talked about the fact that this property is leased under a triple net lease, and therefore it would be marketed to an investor as an income producing property. Explained how investors look at the purchase price they're going to pay based on what kind of gross rent and expenses and capitalization rates are appropriate. I provided a workup that supports the current assessed value by the income approach, which is the most relevant approach to value considering that this is a leased property. I also presented comparable sales of 2 leased pick and save locations, including one in Madison, as well as 2 actual leased festival foods that sold. And those sale prices also support the current assessed value. So in my view, the assessed value is accurate, and I didn't reduce the assessment at open book, and nothing that was presented during this testimony changes my mind. I think the assessment's fair.
Thank you. That would close the testimony in the case. I am now closing the testimony in this case. I will now open up deliberations in this case by asking the Board of Review members to state, based upon the sworn testimony presented, whether the assessor's valuation of the property is correct or incorrect. And then I guess to be specific, there's a sample motion in your packet as well. And I also have it in front of me. So I guess the deliberations are open. Alder Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to clarify procedurally, do we simply go around stating our current belief on the subject, or is this like a free-flowing debate kind of a thing? Or I guess how does this work at this point?
I think it's more of a free-flowing debate, and then there'll be a motion.
Okay.
So,
I guess I'll go first. I appreciate you coming in and giving your making the objection and taking the time to put this together. But I haven't seen, I don't think we've seen enough evidence to overturn the presumption of correctness of the appraisal, of the assessor's appraisal. I don't know that, my understanding is that, that the presumption of correctness is with the appraisal, assessor's appraisal, correct? And so I feel like that should be there's a threshold to meet that bar, and I don't find the comparables compelling with that they were vacant. And then, especially with the comparables here being more recent and then being right in the middle of that, even though we use the 198 number, I know the square footage number is different, but still it's like 246 and 187, 235, 171. So there's something in the middle there. It just doesn't seem like there's a ton of, to me, there doesn't seem like there's like a really strong basis of evidence for sustaining the objection.
Other comments or motions? Alder Tucker Long.
I make a motion to exercise the Board of Review's judgment and discretion pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 770.47 sub 9 sub A by majority and roll call vote hereby determine that the assessor's valuation is correct.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Harrison. Motion before the body. Comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, oh, sorry, that's right. I guess since it is a roll call vote, as Clerk Lick reminds me, if Clerk Lick would read the roll.
Alderperson Helmke,
Aye.
Alderperson Weiss,
Aye.
Alderperson Tucker Long,
Aye.
Mayor Diaz,
Aye.
Alderperson Braithwaite,
Aye.
Alderperson Swanson,
Aye.
Alderperson Hoax,
Aye.
Alderperson Harrison,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
The motion passes. That concludes this item. And I know the next item has been withdrawn by the objector, but just to read it, move on to 12B, which is a consideration of the objection to the 2025 real estate tax assessment from Azura Verona LLC for the property located at 285 Wildcat Way, tax parcel ID number 060821186602. Clerk Lick, my understanding is this objection has been withdrawn.
Yes, the objector's agent emailed me earlier this morning and withdrew their objection.
Okay. My understanding is that under state law, this meeting must be a minimum of 2 hours. We've only been going for an hour and 11 minutes. So I'm going to recess until 7:58 unless an objector comes in. And if not, we will reconvene at 7:58. Obviously, nobody go too far away in case someone does come in. All right, it is 7:58. We are back in session. Since we did start at 6:01, we will have to finish at 8:01 so we can hit the mandatory 2 hours. So I guess I don't think anything's going to happen, but we can just, I guess, hang out till 8:01.
I wanted to share with all of you too, I am starting a new job on June 16th. And I'll be working for the city of Hutchinson.
Oh, nice.
And it's east of where I'll be living, but I'll be the city engineer and
Oh, that's
assistant
cool.
director of public works.
Oh.
It's kind of a mashup of Mike Trotter's position and Carla's position, kind of a mashup, so I'm excited. Started in 2 weeks.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, Hutchinson's about population 15,000.
Oh, all right, yeah, so,
So you can leave Wisconsin, but you can't leave local government.
Well, you know what's funny? Our slogan is Hometown USA. The slogan is Minnesota's hometown.
So you just start putting comic
Minnesota USA's hometown.
Yeah.
it is now 8:01, and no one else is in the room, so we'll move on to item 13, which is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alder Hoax, is there a
Second.
second? Seconded by Alder Humke. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? And we are adjourned at 8:01 PM. Thank you, everyone.